Okay, hi folks. So yeah, this is the recorded part. I will try to keep this short because I know that PowerPoint land is not a fun place to be in. We're going to be looking at typography fonts, web design, and how they all sort of interact. Basically, we're going to be looking at the technology behind it, and we're going to be looking at the design portion of things as well. So I'm going to whip through this PowerPoint. This PowerPoint is most definitely available on the site as this guy right here, and we'll talk about some of these links. Some of them are just for your review anyway. Okay, so let me move that so my big bobblehead isn't covering up words. Alright, so how it used to be, the font tag. We don't use the font tag anymore. The reason why is because the font tag is in HTML, and as we know now, HTML is for structure. Right? We still try to get away from defining things that are presentation using HTML. We want to use CSS instead. And how it is, we have a few different ways to assign fonts, and a lot of this is review. I know it is. So we have, obviously, font dash family, which gives us what's called a font stack. You know, it goes and it checks to see if it has a font by the name of Arial. If it doesn't have that, then it goes to Helvetica. If it doesn't have that, it goes to Open Sans. And this is actually supposed to be... See, that's not even right, because those aren't actually foot marks. They're supposed to be straight up and down, but okay. And then Sans serif, which is... that final section there is always a category of type. So you can have serif, you can have sans serif, you can have the cursive, and there are a couple of others I don't remember. Okay, the mouse wheel is evil. Okay, there it goes. So this particular link, yes, thank you. Alright, fine. Fonts in the font stack are common to Mac. So if you're using just font family, you want to make sure that you use common fonts that are across a couple of the, at least, Mac and Windows. So here's, this one actually works. So I'll pop that one in there instead of that. And then I gotta learn not to do that. I can see that right now. A couple more links that go to W3 schools. There's nothing really major there. Back that up a little bit. Okay. Obviously, W3 Schools has some fun stuff. This is a lot of the stuff that was covered in Web 1. So if you need to cover it, you know, have at. I don't really think we need to cover it here. Some things that people do forget, you can transform things to just uppercase or just lowercase. That's good for menus, you know, menu words. You can change text indenting, letter spacing. We know that. Okay. We'll get to that in just a minute. Oh, and it does have information about the different kinds of fonts. Serif, sans serif, monospace, that's one of the ones I didn't mention earlier. Monospace is good if you're listing things that need to be columnar, in columns. So like prices, so that they can compare this with that, and everything will line up one on top of another perfectly, because each letter takes up the same amount of space. Okay, let's see. We'll talk about that. We did that. Alright, sweet. How it is now. So you also have font services. They have things like, well, it used to be called Typekit. Now it's called Adobe Fonts. And I'm pretty sure that this link doesn't work. That is not a browser. And it says... Okay, yeah. Well, okay, it does actually go to a good page, though. All right. So, and it tells you how you can use Adobe Fonts. And they do have some very good fonts. Adobe is what's called a font foundry. So they create their own fonts, basically. And there's a lot to creating a font, but you probably know that already. So this particular page tells you how you can add it to a web project and that sort of thing. So there is that information there. You have Google Fonts, which is what we're going to be messing with Today, Font Deck, WebType, Fonts.com, and so on. There are a ton of different font places that you can get fonts for your web page. And now I feel weird because I keep saying the word font. Anyway, you can also host your own fonts. You have to convert them to different font formats, and there are those: TrueType, WOFF, EOT, and SVG. And there's a generator there. You always want to be careful of your licensing with fonts. Some fonts are free, and most of them you get what you pay for. But anyway, there is the flashes of unstyled text. Sometimes you can have it so that basically a page loads and then it sort of flashes for a second while it loads all the fonts. So the Google Web Font Loader, it's part of the Google hosted libraries, and it addresses that. It's not a real big deal unless you're working with a very large site or a slow site where you don't want that kind of thing to impact the professionalism of the site. Let's see, just what font add-on. That it'll tell you what font is used on the page. You can also just look in the HTML and CSS. And then we come to the fun part, which is icon fonts. Let's see there. So icon fonts contain symbols, not letters. The one we're going to look at is Font Awesome here in just a bit. But yeah, icon fonts contain icons. So, arrows and stop signs, and this is Font Awesome, for example. The result being these little guys. So those are made from a font because, as we know, a font is vector information. So it makes sense that you use vector to create or to have little images. So the HTML basically looks something like this. It's put into an italics tag because it has no meaning, basically. So you have to make sure you always back it up with some sort of HTML or structure behind it. And it's a class. It says, okay, it's a Font Awesome font. It's the Font Awesome Facebook font. And we want it to be 2 times bigger than regular. And then it closes it. And then you can style it. All right, so there's the example. You can have rollovers. They even have a little bit of animation. That's nice. So Font Awesome. Anyway, so icon fonts. There are a few other Font Awesome fonts. What else we got? Different operating systems will render the font slightly differently. This one was from a few years ago. This was Word Windows 2013. Calibri 12.24 on the left, and Calibri 12.24 on the right, Mac OpenOffice. So you can see there's a bit of difference there, and it's not just the line height. Okay, so just a few guidelines. You don't want to use too many typefaces. I mean, it's really tempting, but you want to keep the typefaces down to a dull minimum. You can use different faces from the same font. So let's say I'm using Minion Pro, and then I use the Minion caption for the caption under the image, and I use Minion italic, or I will have I have a logo, and I use a different version of Minion, the Minion typefaces. You want to watch your color contrast. Examples of bad contrast, for example, this PowerPoint. This is bad color contrast. It's too low. Display fonts or novelty fonts. People love those. They love to play with them, but the thing is, they're impossible to read a lot of things in. Novelty fonts are things like, Curls MT, Comic Sans. I'm sure you can think of some of the others. There's one font that was made entirely of pictures of nude people. Yeah, I'm sure you've seen them. You don't want to use too many of those at all. They're hard to read. You don't want to distort the typefaces. Okay, if you stretch or skew a typeface, even if you outline a typeface, you're changing how it works from what the original font designer intended. And fonts, typefaces are very, very specifically designed to work in specific ways. They're, the font software itself contains information that says, okay, if this font is rendered at 72 dpi or an inch high-ish, depending on what your screen looks like, then change these things about it so that it will work at that size. So if you convert it to vector and then you outline it, you skew it, you're not being true to those original design decisions. And you can try different combinations. The way you can try different combinations is using something like a font specimen or a prototype page. So some of these, this is just, well, that one's not. That's sort of a control, I guess. It's just the default. Wow. See, these are just different typefaces on a large amount of type. That's nice. What is that? Standard Google. Oh, old standard. Okay. It's a very upright font. Kind of fussy little serifs on it. Still very readable. So it's a good way to get an idea of how a font will behave. That's nice. Nice and clear. It leads you right across the page. Anyway. Typography on the web. You want to use your fonts that are specifically for web and screen. And there are those fonts out there. You'll see in just a minute what those look like. So the fonts specifically for the web and screen work very well when rendered in pixels. They're crisp. And you want to consider the purpose of the font. There are typefaces that were designed specifically for example, the stock exchange information very closely printed together on a newspaper, like a huge newspaper. There was a specific typeface designed for that. So what's the purpose of the typeface? What's it going to do? Is it to grab the attention? Is it to inform? Is it to be a side note that doesn't grab attention immediately? What's it for? Typical. The mouse wheel is not my friend today. Typical line length should be around 45 to 75 characters. And that's best for reading. Any more than that, and the eye just gets tired after going, after that line. It's a lot, and then you got to come back to the beginning. Our eyes are biological. You always want to make it easier to read the information, which should make sense. But honestly, those of us who were on the web in the early 2000s, you remember all of those sites that for some reason fell in love with using bitmap fonts that were like that big. Kid you not. Anyway, line height, also known as leading, should be between 125% to 175%, or 1.25 line height is 1.25 to, come on Kate, 1.75, yes. So there are more characters, if there are more characters per line, a taller X height means a taller line height. Center alignment. Especially, obviously this is Web 2, so hopefully you've gotten the download already, but center alignment is hard to read. So is right align. You want to use that kind of sparingly. I have seen it done well, but you want to use it sparingly. Center alignment is used for things like wedding invitations and that kind of thing. The reason for that is those things used to be hand-lettered, and center aligning things that are hand-lettered is hard. So it was used for like fancy occasions. Web pages are there to impart information. They're not a fancy occasion, so keep things easy to read. Easy to read. In the weight of the font. Is it a very light font? Is it a very heavy font? Those can be very difficult to read. So, yeah. I doubt any of this is really major news. And then finally, we have relative sizes of typography. How big should your header 1 be in comparison to your paragraph, or in comparison to your H2 or your H3? My take on that is use your eyes and use your brain. If you need a place to start, then here are some possibilities. Okay, all these are starting points. You can take it or leave it. Okay, so this one is lamb.cc typograph. You can, it's a little bit interactive, so you can change the different sizes and see how it changes. You can also get, you can get the code. There are the font sizes. They use as M's, but you can convert those to Rems with no trouble. Don't think those are interactive, no. Okay. Body, you can change the font size a bit. Things get a little bit weird. Right now, line height is 1 1/4, which is 1.25. You can see what it would look like with a taller line height. That's a 1.75. Okay. And that's your base size. And you can also try different units. Oh, that's huge. Let's make that a little bit smaller. All right. All this is sort of a modeling tool, if you will. It's you don't have to assume it's the end all be all. I also has a links to the elements of typographic style. Oh, that's the one. There's one online. I'll see if I can find it. Anyway, so that's lamb.cc typograph, not topography, typograph. I don't know why. It's also modular scale, which is about the same thing. Give me 1 second. There it goes. Oh. Nope, scratch that. They've changed since the last time I was there. Okay, scratch modular and scale. They used to be about the same thing. And we'll blow that away. Cool. Get rid of that. Let's take a look at the code pen. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, there's an example with the different sizes based on modular. Yeah, modular scale isn't there anymore. Yeah. Okay, so there's that particular part.